Hello and thank you for joining us for Northwest Newsweek Year in Review, Episode 3. We entered the home stretch of the year with September opening up with a bizarre incident in Atikokan after a 53-year-old man was arrested and charged for allegedly administering a noxious substance to a woman, confining her against her will, and assaulting her a month and a half prior. Atikokan OPP say Brian Bates was charged with forcible confinement, assault with a weapon, and numerous other charges. But it was only brought to light following a post on social media by OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrique that Bates was in possession of an arsenal of firearms. Officers seized 70 firearms from multiple properties owned by the accused, along with drum magazines, 91 kilograms of ammunition, and body armor. Many of the firearms and devices seized are prohibited under Canadian law. If you had Snap Federal Election on your 2021 bingo card, congratulations. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called upon the Governor-General in August to dissolve Parliament and send Canadians back to the polls in September. For Thunder Bay Superior North and Thunder Bay Rainy River, voters chose to send both Patty Hajdu and Marcus Pulowski back to Ottawa. In Kenora, a similar result to the 2019 election was produced, but there were still some surprises that kept candidates and their supporters on the edge of their seats until the very end. 1 year and 11 months after being elected for the first time, Conservative Eric Malillo is going back to Ottawa after successfully defending his seat against 4 challengers, including a very strong push from the NDP's Janine Seymour. But in the end, it was Malillo with a resounding 2,800 vote lead, which put him over the top.
It's an incredible honor to continue to serve. Our riding continue to work. There's obviously a lot more work to do after only 2 years, so I'm very excited by that opportunity and thankful to all those that put their trust in me.
Seymour started the evening with many early polls working in her favor, and for a time it felt like she had Malillo on the ropes. But things slowly turned somber as the night played on. She says she's still trying to reconcile the fact that many of the issues she campaigned on will still be there.
We're still not going to have those discussions. So if not now, when? The issues that I was raising were issues that need to be spoken about, and clearly Kenora doesn't want to speak about them.
On a national scale, the results put the country back where it was at the beginning of the election with a Liberal minority government. Liberal candidate David Bruno says while the results both locally and nationally aren't exactly what he was hoping for, he believes the country is in good hands going forward.
We were looking for a majority so we wouldn't have to negotiate the difficult negotiations that were sometimes counterproductive when it came to the House of Commons. So having said that, yeah, I'm very pleased that it's going to be a Liberal government and we're going to continue on.
Malillo says the final seat count and the Liberal minority outcome look eerily similar to 2019 and believes this solidifies the sentiment that this was an unnecessary election. But he plans to continue to keep the government to account and more from the opposition benches.
But as well, the other side of that is the working committee, the work sort of behind closed doors to work collaboratively with not just the government but the other opposition parties to advance our region's interests forward.
And in a pair of moments rarely seen on election night Monday, both Seymour and Bruno came to the Malillo wrap party to offer their congratulations and reflect on a well-fought campaign. Adam Riley, TBT News. In the aftermath of the federal election, questions and controversy lingered over a lack of access in some area First Nations in the Kenora district. It was alleged that 3 remote communities did not have access to day of election polls and instead were only given access to advance polls. The most notable sight at some polling stations on election day were long lines, but in some remote First Nations here in the Northwest, there were no lines or polling stations for that matter. The NDP's Get Out the Vote coordinator Tanya Cameron says she was contacted by Pikangikum Chief Dean Owen, who says there was no polling station in his community Monday. Cameron contacted the region's returning officer who stated Pikangikum requested an advanced poll due to the annual hunt in lieu of an election day station.
I immediately messaged the chief and he said, no, that's not what he agreed to. He requested the advanced poll. Apparently there are hunters that were going to be away, so they wanted to be able to vote, but not everyone hunts. So people remaining in the community were fully expecting to vote on election day.
As it turns out, Pikangikum wasn't alone. It was one of 3 communities that only had advanced polls, the others being Poplar Hill and Cat Lake. On Thursday, Eric Malillo, who ran and won for the Conservatives in the Kenora riding, commented on the issue on social media, tweeting, I am very concerned about reports that voters in certain northern polls may have received incorrect voting information from Elections Canada, agreeing there should be an investigation into what happened and that it never happens again. He says he isn't sure if Monday's outcome would be any different, but he does consider what happened very concerning.
I'm not going to make assumptions about who someone who didn't vote would have voted for had they voted or anything like that. But obviously, it's not. This is not a situation we want to be in, and that Elections Canada wants to be in. We have to ensure that this is rectified, and of course, moving forward into the future to ensure that it never happens again.
Another election day polling station snafu experienced by First Nations in the Kenora district happened in Grassy Narrows. According to Cameron, the polling station there didn't become operational until 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, leaving residents there only 7.5 hours to cast their vote, unlike the rest of Canada, which received 12 hours.
And so that was a late open. Chief Fobister had requested that it close later since it opened late, and that was denied.
An Elections Canada spokesperson insists they had a deal in writing with the 3 First Nations to hold their vote on the 13th instead of regular voting day at their request due to the start of hunting season. Officials in Cat Lake and Pikangikum were not available for comment. Adam Riley, TBT News. It was years in the making and at times had some questioning whether or not it would ever become a reality. But at the end of October, any and all possible notions of that idea were put to rest. Greenstone Mine is a go. Officials from across the region gathered at the site to mark the beginning of construction.
It's incredible. We've been working for this for so long now.
It's been a heck of a ride already, and it's just getting going, so this train is out of the station.
It is no longer considered proposed as the long-awaited Greenstone Mine has officially broken ground. Construction has begun on the massive project, which is expected to create 2,100 immediate jobs and bring a major boom into the region. The Geraldton Gold Zone previously supported mines here between 1938 and 1970. It is that legacy through the tailings from those mines that Greenstone Mine will make its fortune, with more than 5 million ounces of gold expected to be produced over the initial 14 years. Among the dignitaries on hand was Minister Greg Rickford, who says mining plays a critical role in the province's economy going forward and will especially benefit Northern Ontario.
The market has come to Northern Ontario for our minerals. We've been able to open or move many mining projects across this region to the starting line for construction or some other major environmental milestone. So we're on the move here.
It has been 14 years since the mine was first proposed, and in late 2019 it looked like the project could have collapsed under litigation between its owners. But when Equinox Gold and Orion Mine Finance Group stepped in and each purchased 50% of the project, that is when things really took off. Greenstone Mayor Renaud Beaulieu says he's still astounded to see the mine move ahead, and he's looking forward to the future.
I got to tell you, it went so fast in the last 6 months when, we had Equinox Gold and Orion come in this venture. It was unbelievable. And with the team they have behind them, wow, we're in good hands and we're going to see a lot of prosperity in our area.
Preliminary construction included building access roads and a temporary water treatment plant in the lead up to this week's ceremony, which will provide a baseline of infrastructure for construction. However, mine GM Eric Lamontagne says there's still a lot of work to be done over the next couple months, including securing the site further.
Because currently we have a lot of access on the highway, and it's not the perfect world, and we'd like to just cut one access to the highway for security. It's important. First objective. Second objective, before Christmas, we'll start to pour 2 buildings. Well, we already select our contractor to do that, and they will mobilize in November, and we'll pour 2 concrete slabs to assemble a pre-engineering building over there.
And while Wednesday's ceremony officially kicks off construction of the mine, it doesn't mean that the clock begins ticking on the 14-year lifespan for the mine. That only begins next fall when the mine completes construction and goes into production. Adam Riley, TBT News. Thunder Bay Superior North MP Patty Hajdu was given a new role following her September election win, shifting from the health portfolio to Minister of Indigenous Services, calling it a portfolio she's passionate about. Hajdu faced several challenges right away, with a decision looming on whether or not her government would appeal a court ruling to give billions of dollars to Indigenous children who are in the child welfare system, all the while continuing with the task of bringing clean drinking water to First Nations. Corey Nordstrom has more.
Patty Hajdu has been moved to her 4th ministerial duty with the unveiling of the new federal cabinet on Tuesday. Hajdu says she feels honored that Justin Trudeau named her to this position, which she has some familiarity with.
It's something that the Prime Minister knows that I have a passion about, and that I've worked on many issues that intersect with Indigenous people over the number of years that I've been living in Northern Ontario.
The newly named Indigenous Services Minister is looking forward to the work ahead, which includes the lifting of the final 44 boil water advisories on First Nations across Canada. It's a goal Trudeau promised to accomplish before becoming Prime Minister in 2015.
This is a top priority for the Government of Canada, and I'm really looking forward to understanding those continued long-term boil water advisories better and meeting with those individual communities to hear their perspectives on how we more quickly accelerate this work.
One of the first moves her office had to make was a critical one. On Friday, Ottawa chose to appeal a federal court decision to uphold 2 Canadian Human Rights Tribunal orders to pay billions to Indigenous children wrongly placed in the child welfare system. We spoke to Hajdu a few days before that decision was made.
Litigation isn't serving anybody. And so I'll be working with my colleagues over the next day or so that we can understand the next steps forward. There is no question that compensation needs to be paid for the historical human rights violations.
Another new duty of Hajdu's will be overseeing FedNor. The Thunder Bay Superior North MP is excited to shape the work being done at the Economic Development Agency to better fit the needs of Northern Ontario. Corey Nordstrom, TVT News.
When we come back, officials with the Geraldton District Hospital honor a long-serving physician. Our recap of the big stories of 2021 continues with a story of commemoration and dedication. While it had been providing services to the Greenstone area for some time, Geraldton's new expanded emergency room had been holding a secret until late October. That's when officials gathered to officially name the new ER after a local physician. While the $21 million expansion of Geraldton's emergency department is complete from a physical and operational standpoint, something was still missing, and that something, as hospital CEO Daryl Galusha says, was difficult to keep under wraps.
We've kept that covered. We've had things. This man has dedicated his life, his family life, his personal life to the people of the Greenstone District. It was a unanimous decision to choose the name the ER in honor of Dr. Lane.
For 40 years, Dr. Roy E. Lane has brought people into this world, saved lives, contributed to the health and well-being of residents, and at one point in 2005 was the only physician in the Greenstone area. A man of few words, Dr. Lane was taken aback slightly by the unveiling.
What were you kind of feeling?
A bit dumbfounded, yeah. It was quite a surprise.
The expanded space not only includes 5 rooms for emergency care, but is also bringing chemotherapy to the region for cancer patients and space for mental health supports. Greenstone Mayor Renard Beaulieu heralds the project as a game changer, not just for his community though.
It takes a while to put things like this together, but you know what? We should all be proud. This is a necessity for our community, for the regions, for our Indigenous communities, fly-in surroundings. This is an area that needs to have the proper service for our healthcare service.
In 2019, Minister Greg Rickford was able to announce the expansion of the ER and came back 2 years later to see the improvements while attending a ceremony at the new Greenstone mine this week.
We're so pleased, but this is an example of the kind of asset a community like Greenstone is going to require if we're going to build a mine here in this municipality. So it's just the beginning, Ryan, but it's probably the one that's most important as a former nurse who's lived and worked across Northern Ontario.
Adam Riley, TBT News. The 2021 forest fire season officially came to an end in November. It was once again a season that threatened communities, forced evacuations, choked the Northwest in a thick, hazy smoke, and also managed to break some records.
It's surely one that will earn a place in our organization's memory for in many respects.
Out of the record-shattering 793,000 hectares burned by forest fires in Ontario this year, the vast majority were here in the Northwest, with nearly 780 hectares burned as a result of the 989 fires that ignited between the Manitoba-Ontario border and Marathon. According to Fire Information Officer Chris Marchand, much of the heavier fire activity, which saw larger community-threatening fires, took place in the Red Lake region.
Particularly where we call the elbow. It's where that corner of the boundary makes an angled turn. That area in particular is very fire prone. It's a combination of the fuels and the weather pattern. We had lots of hot, dry, windy weather and with very little rainfall. And that is a perfect recipe for those very large fires that we saw in those areas.
This year, weather stations in that elbow area recorded half or even 1/3 of the normal amount of rainfall. And as felt by area farmers, most of the Northwest experienced drought conditions. And as a result, the AFFES will be tracking those conditions and factoring them into the fire hazard for next spring. Marchand notes, in addition to the overall hectares burned in the Northwest, 2 of the largest fires seen in the region, one in the Kenora District and one in the Red Lake District, surpassed records themselves, one of which achieving a notable accolade.
The Kenora 51 fire is actually the largest fire on record now in Ontario at 200,677 hectares. It surpassed a 2011 fire from Sioux Lookout. And that fire accounted for, 1/4 of the hectares burned this season in Ontario.
As for 2022, Marchand says it's difficult to predict what the next fire season will bring, but is hopeful they will see manageable situations that will have minimal impact on people, lives, and property. Adam Riley, TBT News. Following years of discussions with area First Nations, the highway twinning project from the Manitoba border to Kenora took another step forward in late November. Minister of Northern Development and Indigenous Affairs Greg Rickford and Ontario Transportation Minister Carolyn Mulroney were in Kenora to sign 2 contracts with Indigenous partners. One was for the tree and brush removal within the new right-of-way for the first section of the twinning. The other is for producing the raw materials needed to build the road base. The 4-laning project has been on the table for more than a decade, and the 2 cabinet ministers say the Ford government is making it happen. Rickford, who is also the MPP for Kenora Rainy River, says he is looking forward to finally seeing physical work begin, knowing it will benefit more than just those who travel along the highway from Kenora into Manitoba.
Shoal Lake 39, which sits right at the border, almost literally, is a community that had a requirement for a road to be built, to be repaired into and straightened into their community. So they're doing the clearing. That started like sometime this week or early next. Wind 4 is involved in the raw material processing required to create the right-of-way once the trees are cut, and the RFP for the construction of the actual road, so the surface and other components is now well underway.
Earlier that month, Rickford was joined by Labour Minister Monty McNaughton in Kenora to announce a $3.7 million training initiative for some of the Indigenous communities who are working on the project. A man who participated in the kidnapping and beating of another man who he thought had information about his missing sister received a lengthy prison sentence in November. 30-year-old Andrew Otway is the brother of Alyssa Turnbull, the young woman who disappeared in the Nipigon area in early 2020. In September of that year, 4 men forcibly confined and assaulted a man in Nipigon, demanding info about Turnbull's disappearance. The victim was then put in the trunk of a car, but he managed to escape and contact police. Otway pleaded guilty to kidnapping with a firearm and aggravated assault. The judge sentenced him to 6 years, citing vigilantism as a serious concern. Turnbull remains missing, with a $50,000 reward posted by the OPP. Coming up after the break, the Township of Ignace announces its plans to proceed on the topic of an underground nuclear waste storage facility. Welcome back to Northwest Newsweek Year in Review, Episode 3. A bold step forward in December by the Township of Ignace as it officially announced that its council will be the body that makes the final decision on whether or not the community will play host to an underground nuclear waste storage repository. Ignace was one of the first communities to volunteer itself a decade ago as a potential host site for the proposed facility currently being explored by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Final decision by the NWMO on if Ignace will be a suitable site for the project is expected to be made in 2023, but one of the parameters set by the agency is that the community must be a willing host. The discussions of having the question on the ballot has been suggested by many groups and organizations, but Ignace Mayor Penny Lucas says she believes the project will be an election issue, and by putting the final decision in the hands of council just makes sense.
I think that's going to be one of the ways where the community is going to show whether they are part of their willingness. That's part of the willingness process. So I'm sure that every candidate is going to be asked, are you in favor of this project or not? If yes or no, why? And that's going to show NWMO and I guess the rest of the world whether or not Ignace is interested in looking at becoming a host for this project.
December saw the dispute between the town of Manitowage and their volunteer firefighters escalate further, following the sudden resignation of Deputy Fire Chief Dennis Narbonne, stating the community's fire crews are in a grave situation. Narbonne says 6 of the 20 members of the volunteer service have now either resigned or been dismissed by the acting fire chief. And after more than 28 years with the fire service, he says he did not leave on good terms. In a letter to the community posted on social media, he claims the dispute is entirely about the lack of regard for the safety of firefighters and residents, along with non-communication between senior officers and township management. In November, all 23 volunteer firefighters took a sudden leave of absence in order to make their concerns known. Town officials say there's been a lot of misinformation circulating about the dispute, and that they say a 31-hour-long withdrawal of services has led to a pending review by the fire service by the Ontario Fire Marshal in early December. In early December, the township announced they had hired a new fire chief who would be taking command in July. And that wraps up our recap of 2021. If you wish to recap more of the year's top stories, log on to tbnewswatch.com, where you can see all of the episodes of Northwest Newsweek we've produced this year and in years past. While much of what 2022 has to offer is yet to remain unknown to us all, we know that we will be there to cover the stories that matter and have an impact on the region. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the new year.